And we're back. All right. Fantastic. Want to say thank you to all of my esteemed friends that are sitting in the little spaces around my computer screen and their smiling faces, and for the wisdom that they are going to impart, not just to me, but they're going to blow your minds with experience and knowledge and probably some citations, because none of it's going to come from them, but stuff that they've looked up on Wikipedia. So today we have another addition to our group. I don't want to say we lost a person. I want to say that we kicked him out and he's not invited to come back. But we have a new person, and that is the right. Let me make sure I have this correct. The Right Reverend.
Oh, I'm not wearing my gigantic ring for you to kiss.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Yeah. No. And when you see Matt in person, there's two things that'll happen. Either one, he makes you kiss this gigantic ring that he wears, almost like he's a Marvel arch villain, or he'll see you from across the street. He will yell your name, run at you, and jump into your arm. So, Matt, what is your official title?
It's assistant to the bishop for Evangelical Mission, which is my synod's way of talking about the director for Evangelical Mission, which is something every synod in the ELCA has one of. We
will maybe in another video talk about what you had to do, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, to get that position. But in this video, we have a different topic, all right? And that topic that you were bringing to the table is what?
Well, what I'd love for us to talk about, because there's some okay ideas in this group, marginal, acceptable ideas. And that is, the pandemic has shifted everything about our entire lives. And it's obviously shifted huge aspects of how we act as the church. And so what I'd love to hear your wisdom about and share my thoughts about is, what are the changes that you've seen that you think are actually changes we ought to hang on to? Like, when there's a vaccine, when we all return to some sort of normal sometime next year, whenever that is, what are the things you hope we don't stop doing? Because we've started doing them during this time, and it actually looks a little bit more like Jesus than what we did before March.
Andrew or Will, would you like to go into that first? Just so you guys know, when I'm editing these together, the extremely long periods of silence make it so easy. Yeah. So give me less work and just talk. All right, go.
No, well, let me just say something about that. Because I'm watching the edited video and we're talking, and then like at one point my head is here and then suddenly it's over here. So it's like, oh yeah, he cut out that big silence when Will didn't talk. So
hey, Andrew.
What?
I'm making a gesture right now below the screen at you. You want to guess?
Whoa.
Please tell me you have pants on this time.
All right.
I just want to let you know, Matt, that at least two of us sitting at this table during CPE, our slogan was, "We lowered the bar." So if you're looking
we buried the bar.
If you're looking for helpful, you came to the wrong corner.
Wow.
Remember, our bar today was marginal. Just acceptable.
Yeah, just something that won't hurt people, not damaging.
Like string full sentences.
Yeah.
So let's
can they be run-on sentences?
Yeah, and just get back into the topic. So, Will or Andrew, do either of you have some kind of just something to add to this from your experience as the Right Reverend Matthew has stated, something that your congregation or you as a pastor
spit it out,
have been forced to do during? I'm going to cut all this out, so it doesn't matter. Just answer the question. You know it.
Yeah. So let me answer the question. As we talk, I'll probably think of some more, but two things that came out of this, which I think maybe would really be a general answer for many of us. We started, because of this, of course, recording the service. And that's something that I think, honestly, all of us are hesitant to do because we didn't quite know how to do it, but it was that baptism by fire. So now I learned how to do all of that. I don't have the blessing of any kind of staff to help with that. So, I mean, I'm doing all of that. So that's something that's actually going to continue, and everyone's really excited about it. So it's like, okay. No, but the other thing that I've not, online giving, that's we're trying to do that, and this really kickstarted that.
Matt, I want to throw it back at you with, as a member of the synod staff and a bishop's assistant. Are you guys looking at the different congregations in your synod at the different things they're doing? And are there things that you've seen in some congregations that you're like, wow, that's awesome, we should share that maybe with other congregations, maybe try to do this?
I mean, the thing that's really interesting to me is as I've thought about this, it feels to me like the pandemic has been kind of like a magnifying glass. Like whatever existed pre-pandemic, this has just amplified that in one way. So there certainly are congregations that have struggled to see their mission beyond simply serving the people who show up on Sunday morning, or the members of a congregation who have had a hard time seeing church as more than just 60 minutes on Sunday morning. The places that already struggled with that in the early months of the pandemic struggled even more. Some of the places just shut down, like literally just stopped doing very much. There are a handful of the smallest congregations. You know, it took them a little while to be able to embrace some of the digital technology, so they just, would send things out in paper because, and in all fairness, because some of their members didn't have access to technology or were old enough that they were really uncomfortable with technology. Well, now the months have gone on, and even those folks, majority of those folks who were initially uncomfortable with technology are getting there. The congregations that already saw part of their primary target audience being non-Lutherans, right? So the places that were already really concerned about reaching folks who were not automatically going to come to them have used this time to think of completely new ways to do that, and to, to actually use social media. We just hosted a 4-session series in our synod on digital discipleship and evangelism. And the whole point of that was to see every single person in the congregation as someone who can share a post. Like, in some ways, it has never been easier to quote unquote invite a friend to church. It's literally clicking a share link and saying, hey, this sermon really touched me, and I know you're going through a rough time in your life. I just want to share it with you. There are some places that are really leaning into how do we share this inclusive and loving gospel with more people. And the big question for a lot of the congregations who are really trying to think proactively about this is, how is it going to affect staffing going forward?
Yeah.
Like a lot of, the places that maybe have the most financial means to do so are thinking about, do we need to be looking at a staffing plan that includes a part-time minister for social media? Like somebody whose sole job it is to be connecting with the folks who only connect digitally.
Because we are now online, our congregation size has grown, in the sense, kind of what you're saying, Matt, that we're able to reach people outside of our typical confined spaces.
Yeah, Bishop Eaton put that out there, and she said exactly what you just did there. She says, it was like a reminder. Remember, probably more than the congregation that you serve are seeing these videos and virtual worship. And it was interesting because, well, this is kind of tooting my own horn, I guess, but I was like, oh yeah, of course. Just to kind of go off of that as well. It's interesting when I get comments on like our virtual worship from people. We get comments from people in California and Colorado that said, hey, I happened on your worship, or so-and-so shared it with me, and that was really great. And it's just kind of this different feeling to realize how big that is. And it's also a reminder of the Church Universal. Apparently there's someone in England and I think India that has watched it. YouTube told me that. So that's great. I mean, but it's just kind of that reminder, and
that is, that's completely different, at least in my experience, completely different from pre-COVID experience. And that was one of the issues that I know every congregation I've been a part of has kind of dealt with, some better than others, and saying, all right, we're not just here for ourselves, we're here for other people. And worship, when you've thought about in the past of ways to reach out to your community, was worship ever the vehicle you thought you would use to reach other people, or was it other types of ministries that you thought you would get other people, you know, outside of your building to get involved with? If the old man's muted. All right. There. All right, Grandpa. You want to try that again?
I couldn't find my cursor. You were buried. I was playing solitaire.
That's also a grandpa game. So thank you for revealing your age.
Nice.
No. And honestly, I can remember, when we were in those first couple of weeks, we kept gathering, even as some of the congregations were beginning, some of those smaller congregations were actually shutting down. We were still gathering, but encouraging people who didn't feel comfortable to come to not come. The experience of putting worship online seemed heretical to me. That experience of, not that consciously, like intellectually it was a problem, but there was something about it that it was like, dear Lord, I'm becoming a TV evangelist kind of thing, without any of the success. It was like the TV evangelist on the public access channel, and I didn't know how to feel about that. It was, but at the same time recognize that it was something that needed to be done, so no, I mean, worship was one of those things where people had to cross all kinds of thresholds in order to be able to, to participate in worship with resurrection. And so, the idea that would be a form of evangelism was, or, outreach of any kind, it was at the center, and everything else kind of came out from that, which is a very Lutheran concept, according to Wikipedia.
Oh boy.
So, there it is. So, but then, with that idea, who wants to say something about how good it is for people out in the world to see that Christianity, as far as on virtual services or what have you, aren't all the same? So like Will is saying, like, oh, I thought I was a televangelist. That's because that's been the predominant image on TV, online, whatever. So how good is it, or what benefit can we bring to the table by saying, no, there's different expressions being shared?
Will, the way you used that was to kind of connote quality level, right?
Oh, no, I didn't even touch on quality level. That would be aspiring to be at the public access level.
Oh.
Yeah.
But what I'm thinking about in relation to your question just now.
You don't say them out loud, Matt. You lost the game. You don't say the names out loud.
Wait. Do those not get recorded in the thing?
No.
I didn't know that. I thought they did.
So that's like a little Easter egg thing. If you go back and watch the video with us, or especially the one with Jim, and if you watch the squares and you see somebody laughing at something that is not being said, it's because somebody changed a name and ruined everybody else. So go ahead. I'm going to have to edit that out now.
All right. So
we keep losing more, Matt.
I know. I mean, this is going to be like a 5-minute episode by the time we're done. So here's what I'm thinking about, though, in terms of what Will just said about, kind of being like public access, that's a really, really positive thing. And that is, aspirationally, that's what I really hope for out of this time, is that we are reclaiming the sense, in the best sense of the word, and there's been cyclical conversations about this for generations, right? The word evangelical, that it isn't just the televangelist who we feel like is just there for our money, but like we actually have, and I'll give you just a really quick story about the time when making sure that an outsider felt welcome actually became important to the insiders. So when I moved to this call in Wisconsin, I did the same thing I had done in my first call up in Fargo, North Dakota, and that was I started every worship service with, welcome to fill in the blank church. We're glad you're here. And just to let you know, everything you need is in the bulletin. Whatever, I would do all the things that you would want to say if somebody had never been in the room before with you, including, I would say, we're going to celebrate communion today, and it's important for you to know that Christ is the host and we are all the guests. So regardless of church or denominational affiliation, you are welcome at that. Now, if you were a member of my congregation and were there every single Sunday, you got tired of hearing it, I thought. But I was doing it every single Sunday for the sake of the new person in the room. Then there would be the occasional Sunday where I'd forget to say it, and one of the members would say, hey, you forgot to say that today. We miss it. Please say that again next week. And so to me, it bears witness to the fact that when we make the folks who are not here yet a priority, even the folks who are there can come to see that as pure gift, because it's a reminder all the time that this is meant to be an ever-expanding community. And aspirationally, I'm hoping we hang on to that from this time, because we have this, there's almost no distinction between a member and a non-member when everybody's having to access it on YouTube. That's my hope.
You know what? That's I'm really, well, happy is not the right word, but I'm happy to hear that, because I did the same thing in my first two congregations. I mean, I would always have that intro before, in a sense, before worship, and the weeks I would forget to say that welcome, people pointed it out. I mean, more than one person's like, oh, you didn't say that. It's like, well, there was no one here, and they're like, yeah, but it's important to hear. So good. So I connect with that. That's really great.
So I just wonder how that informs this time. Like, that's my hope, is that we're learning to expand our idea of who is a part of our church on a grand scale, and that is one of the pieces we hang on to after this. I'll give you one last example where this really touched my heart. We have a pastor in Milwaukee who's been there for a really, really long time. This is one of those incredibly vibrant urban congregations that is deeply partnered. Like, it is this complex web of partnerships, and that's why it thrives. And it's so funny. I revealed my kind of narrow mindset the first time that I met with that pastor, and we were standing outside of her church, and somebody walked by, and she goes, oh, that's one of our kids right there. And I said, oh, they're members of the congregation? And she looks at me and she goes, no, they live a block down the street. These are all our kids. And like, that was a teaching moment for me to just receive, like, that is how that congregation looks at their neighborhood. These are our people. They come to church? Not necessarily. Some of them do, but they are all our people. And what's interesting is that then becomes reciprocal, and that neighborhood looks at that church, even if they don't belong there, even if they're Catholic or Methodist or Baptist or atheist, they look at that church and they go, that's our church. Those are our people. And that church just put in air conditioning for the first time in its life, and all the funds for the air conditioning came from outside the Lutheran Church.
Wow.
Other community agencies who were like, that's our church.
See, and that's something, I mean, that was, I think you said that was pre-COVID, but, an approach to ministry, that's something else I think I've noticed during this time is people are able to go and view videos from different churches, different congregations. I have a member of our congregation who the woman's brother is a pastor in another part of Ohio that's too far, to drive to on a Sunday morning. And so, she, mentioned to me, we've been watching my brothers. My kids enjoy watching their uncle and his sermons. And I was like, that's great. But even beyond the different ELCA congregations, people have been able to look at, Presbyterian, UCC, Catholic, Methodists, name all the different denominations. And I think that has also kind of broken down some of those divisions, because before that, a lot of it was, oh, this person, oh, they go to the UCC church. That person goes to the Catholic church. And now seems to be less of those distinctions. I wonder how that will play out when theoretically we eventually return to, normal style of church.
One of the things that they, that they keep talking about is this fear of people actually coming back to worship on Sundays. And I guess, my mind is kind of twofold in that. One is that if there's one thing that working with young adults, we did an initiative here in the area through a grant that was given to reach out into the young adult community in the Fort Wayne area, and just sat and talked with people. And one of the things that came out of that was this realization that for young adults, that those in-person connections, those in-person relationships are still the most important ones, and that all of the digital stuff is just supplemental to that. It may allow you to be able to extend your connections, like what we're doing here. You know, some of, you know, at least two of my really good friends, and
you know, now, Will, now, oh, perfect. Now's the time that Hannah needs
He's being
to
let
come in.
out. He's being let out of the
Yeah.
cage.
Now's when we need Hannah to come in and call Will a loser.
Yeah.
Does that mean it's feeding time? I think that's what it is.
Yeah, feeding, beating, they all kind of roll into the same event. But, hey, guess what? That's staying in, just so you know.
Yeah.
That's not getting edited out.
But the you know, the reality is that need for a personal relationship, for being in person, is real. It doesn't go away, and that church is one of those places where that happens, and people need that. But the other thing is that as I was Googling Bible, it brought up the book of Acts or something like that. I don't know what it was.
It's in the back.
Yeah. But you know, there, if you look at what makes the church, it's not worship on Sunday morning. It's not. You know, they are the early church, and you know, first off, they're not even meeting on Sundays. You know, they're in the beginning. But secondly, you know, what Paul is interested in is not in, you know, liturgical practice or, you know, what kind of hymns you're singing, though, you know, he has a little bit to say about that, you know. And so, you know, one of the things that I think that is going to come out of this, or at least I hope comes out of this, is a realization that church is more than worship on Sunday morning. A lot more.
Yeah, that's
That's
good job.
And that's, I think you just summarized my greatest hope for this time, is that it has forced us to live in that reality.
Yeah.
Like, we had to realize that it's more than Sunday morning. And I think we're going to get mileage out of this for another 20 years, because even in a couple of years, when someone says, oh, pastor, you know, we can't do that. You know, we couldn't change that. You go, oh, do you remember 2020? We can,
right.
Like, and I do want to share with you all one of my favorite preaching images, that I've now used in every call, and I can only use it once, but we keep coming back to it, because it's meaningful for me to think about it this way, is to talk about the 60 minutes in worship as a dress rehearsal. So like, for these 60 minutes, we are going to rehearse confession, because it's good for the soul. We're going to rehearse what it's like to receive the free gift of forgiveness, not based on anything we've done. We're going to rehearse generosity. We're going to rehearse listening to ancient words that still shape us. We're going to rehearse forgiveness and the sharing of the peace, all of that. We're going to practice all of that. And then at the end of worship, the curtain's rising. We've practiced our lines here together. And the curtain's rising at the end of worship, because the world can't wait to see what we've rehearsed here. And the main stage of ministry is our daily lives, not the dress rehearsal that we do on Sunday morning. And that's what I hope we leave this with.
Yeah, and that is why Matt works at a synod office and we do not, because that was an awesome answer. So, you know, thank you for that. One of the fears, and I would like to hear some of your fears from your people, of stuff that they're afraid we're going to carry on. Because one of the fears that a lot of our people have is that the longer we stay away from church, people will believe that they can just come to church online.
Like, Matt actually said something worth listening to, and my internet froze. Like, I missed all of it. You were like, it's a dress rehearsal every Sunday for.
Yeah, you're gonna have to watch the video then, because it was a really good answer. But we're saying it's great that we're gonna have online worship, and there are some of our people that are like, well, no, if you're not in the building, then how do we count that? How does that get qualified? So what would we say to someone's fears of saying, well, no, once we're done, yeah, we can do online worship for people that don't come to church typically, but everybody else has to come back. How do we deal with that?
Well, I think part of the problem is that's putting the emphasis on the wrong part of the equation. You know, I think that's part of it is, everybody's worried about that. Is everyone going to come back, or you need to come back, or you have to come back? It's like, well, we want you to come back. We think it'd be a great idea if you did come back. We think there's benefit if you are here, and not just for you, but for everyone else. But you're kind of missing the point if it's like, well, are we going to get back to being church? And that's what we mean by church.
Mm.
One of the things that I think is really great that came out of this that was, unintentional is that, we have a number of homebound folks who are reasonably mobile, but they have to depend on public transportation or, taxi services and things. And Sunday morning is not a good time for any of that. So we have some folks who have been able to attend worship regularly because we're doing it virtually. And that is going to be how they connect to worship on Sunday mornings. It fixes so many problems for them. And we also have a number of folks who prior to COVID traveled a lot for work, which is another thing I'm interested to see how much of that comes back. Right. But we did have some folks who were out and about when all this started coming apart, and they were able to show up for worship on Sunday mornings. And the same thing with some of our snowbirds, and so, like I was saying before, with the young adults who, this is an extension of relationship, but not a supplement for, in-person connections. We're able to do that now as a church, to where it's not even just about who else we're reaching, but it is about keeping those people who otherwise have a very, strenuous or strained connection to in-person connections to be able to connect. So I'm not worried about it. I think people will come back. I'm not sure that they'll come back in the same patterns they were before. But as we were watching, before this, our worship attendance is actually was twice to 3 times the amount that we actually saw on a Sunday morning if you tracked over the course of a month. Because people's idea of regular worship attendance is not every week anymore. It's, if I'm showing up once a month, then I'm regular.
No, that's a really interesting way of looking at it and putting that. And I think that's, so how do we get people to see and adjust, to these new ways? And my assumption is, as you were talking, Will, the thing I was thinking about was, in different church studies, when they moved, the different generations, when highways were built, when, you were able to travel outside of your own town to go to a different church. You didn't just go to the church that was, the Lutheran church that was in your town, when you had options. And with each change, there's been something that the church has had to adapt to. What are ways, and maybe this is what you were asking, Matt, what are ways maybe now where, as the church, we can say, we need to stop adapting and we need to start being proactive to say, look, these are things that are going to help us. And we're not doing them because we have to do them, but because this is what's best for, the church, the big C church.
I mean, one of the things I think, at least this is part of how I embraced my role, both as a pastor and now in the synod office, is to constantly try to paint a positive picture of why these changes actually connect us more deeply to God and to each other. And also, I think that there's this really fascinating concept of the usable past. So like, what in our history as a church can we call on? Because we're so good at looking back. So what in our history can we call on and go, look, we've done this before. And so I love painting that picture of like, the church has been around for 2,000 years. There's no church that's celebrating its 2000th anniversary. Like, none of the places that Paul's writing to in the scriptures are still open. Every single church, I mean, think about the church through the Dark Ages, through the time of the plague. Goodness, we can handle a little bit of cultural upheaval. We've done this before, and like individual churches come and go, but the church, the Jesus people, we ain't going anywhere. Like, and that, I think, to help people frame it outside the immediate urgency of the thing I just lost, but to frame it in a bigger picture and be like, we're all here because generations before us dealt with some stuff way worse than what we're dealing with right now. we can absolutely continue to share the love of Jesus in creative ways in community, because community matters. The way we do it, that's changed tons of ways in the last 2000, and then people realize that, like, it's almost like church privilege. Like, there's a lot of conversation in the culture right now about how privilege is toxic because it keeps you from adapting. It keeps you from seeing the humanity of others. It's almost like, since the 50s and 60s, we've had kind of church privilege in the culture. Like, we didn't have to change much. People just came to us. It's kind of toxic because it kept us from being imaginative with how we can share this in creative ways. We've adapted in ways way bigger than what the current moment is asking of us.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and that's something. A few things. That's something that I really try and address in all the churches that I've served. We can't expect people just to show up at our door, because that's just not happening. It's just not happening anymore. One of the churches I serve, they're like, well, we don't understand why we're shrinking. It's like, well, because what do you do in the community? Who are you reaching out to? People aren't just going to show up. I think in the first church I was talking to, my first church, I was talking to a woman, and I said, okay, well, what kind of outreach do we do? How are we involved in the community? Because this church was a few miles outside of the village, small village. And she's like, well, why would we reach out to anybody? And I'm like, have you looked around? We're shrinking. So I think that, that's a question, of course, pre-COVID and everything, but I think it's a little bit more at the forefront now in COVID, because, it's like, what are we doing? Because now's where the rubber meets the road, unless, you're stuck at home, which a lot of people are. So, but the other thing is, I kind of want to go back. You were talking about, I like that image you had of this is like Sunday's the dress rehearsal.
Yeah.
The image that I use is like Sunday is, I'll call it, Sunday is the party. I said, because the church and who we are and everything is out there. This is just where we get to come together and celebrate everything. And it's really interesting because, in a sense, I'll just like drive that home in sermons and Bible studies and stuff. And it's interesting because when all of this started, a lot of people responded, and they're just like, yeah, we gotta keep the party going, even if it's from our living rooms and things like that. Because, this is a celebration. And then, of course, you lead to, and who doesn't like to be invited to a party? So, yeah.
What's even better is when you bring the party to them, right?
Right.
Because it's not just about you come join our thing, but we actually think that our daily lives are the main thing.
Yeah.
Church then is something that bleeds into every aspect of our lives instead of just the 60 minutes on Sunday morning.
Right, exactly.
And then the reality that our kids, that's their reality. They, when my son plays with some of his friends, he does it online. They don't have to be in the same space like we used to. It's all, a different format. So the question, and maybe it's last and maybe we won't get to it, is, so how long do we think, I know I have some jokes about it that I tell parishioners, but how long do we think the Lutheran memory is? In the sense that, how long do we have to keep doing these new things until people in church say, well, yeah, we've always been doing that? Mm-hmm. Does it take a generation? Is it much shorter than that? When will it just become, well, yeah, that's the way we do it, as opposed to, oh man, we have to try this, we have to do this?
I think that's a brilliant question for a future conversation.
Yeah.
Right, Reverend Matthew Short, assistant to the bishop, DEM, or whatever you call it in Wisconsin. God bless you. Our prayers are with you and for the people of Wisconsin right now, as they are for the people across the country. And we pray for peace and comfort and conversation. So Godspeed be with you and with all of you. Thank you for watching. Click subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll see you next week.